we want, we need to do it, get it through other people and with other people. They don't do it wisely, strategically, or confidently. Mutual gains negotiation, or principled negotiation, or interest-based negotiation. Why is that important to you? You know, how could that work? But focus on the problem and not the people. Seek to understand to be understood. That's as solutions that you can take there. So rather than going into your negotiation with simply an ask, a potential agreement, that's the idea of working out that zone and how you can build it up. What could we do to make that happen so it doesn't cost me? Talk to me. It's not a simple ask. You're taking solutions in with you as well. It's your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Why is this a problem? You know, how could this work? You solve the problem for them as well. You're not just solving your problem, you're solving them.
Let's get started. Today I'd like to welcome Peter Spence. Now, Peter Spence has a long history around the negotiation. Former police negotiator. I'll get Peter to explain a bit more about that as he goes on. But he's started this, the principle of strategic planning negotiation services called SPANS. And he operates out of the North Coast, New South Wales, but he's also done business internationally, helping people with the art of negotiation. I guess I call it win-win-win situations, but Peter's got some really good ways of explaining it today. And today we're going to talk about negotiation around the workplaces, whether you're an employer or an employee, and some of those benefits about, workplace negotiations. So Pete, give us a bit of background about yourself,
Yeah, thanks, Scotty. Thanks for the opportunity to present today. Look, my background has been from a crisis negotiator's point of view. I've been qualified as a former hostage negotiator. I was really keen on the aspects of negotiation where you can resolve issues peacefully, but also to create value, get better outcomes from negotiation. So I pursued that in relation to further research and studies in negotiation. I have an international forum with different experts in negotiation as well. So we share information, ideas, and it's really a collaborative approach. But I really enjoy working with other people to achieve more from our negotiations, from our interactions, and also through organisations, the development of organisations where you can actually succeed more, gain more success, and generally just get more outcomes out of our exchanges in trying to resolve issues and problems.
Now that was 20 years in the police force, right? No, almost 20 years?
Just short of 19 years in the police force. So a range of areas, high conflict areas, as you'd probably imagine. I was involved as an old SWAS operative as well. So going from that force issue to peaceful resolution, that made more sense to work that way. So I had the opportunity to have that baseline training, followed up through the Harvard program on negotiation to teach negotiation in organisations, and I've just got this passion for theory and practice in negotiation, how we can improve all the time. And so borrowing different items from experts and what works and what doesn't work, and then sharing that with other people as well. So
yeah, you've probably got some really cool stories, right? About negotiation and some of the things you did in the police, and you're probably not allowed to share some of those. But you took that also after that chapter, and you ended up in can I call it the health area or the health arena? Or
quite right. I then worked in as an chief executive officer in the health field, so a different field altogether. But a lot of it was learning and picking up from other people and looking at their interests. And this will come back to negotiation and tailing around the knowledge that you need to gain, the power of knowledge. So I worked around the health field, operating an organisation, a not-for-profit, for many years, and then I went out to consult, both in the negotiation training field, but strategic planning, organisational development. So that work took me through mergers and acquisitions, development, CEO of other organisations, developing programs with multiple people involved as well. So, and a lot of the strength or the background with that was around the negotiation field, how you work with other people, how do you achieve a common purpose, and those particular areas as well. So I've had a diverse background in those areas, diverse industries I've worked across: mining, health, finance, through negotiation and organisational development. So that's a snapshot of my background. And really, when we talk about negotiation, it's the fundamentals. We'll talk about workplace negotiation today, but the same fundamentals will go across any area of negotiation, whether it's in industry, whether it's around conflict issues as well. They're the same fundamentals and structure that you can approach so you can get a better outcome from your interactions.
Yeah, well, even negotiating with your partner, like your wife,
that could be the most difficult of all negotiations, so, but the most productive.
But yeah, we're going to talk today about negotiating salaries, conditions, and career opportunities. Simple techniques, that can negotiate successful outcomes for everybody, which is pretty important. Some of those work relationships from that what you did after the police force through that all those industries you went through, being heard, valued, and rewarded more. So over to you, Pete. Let's share your simple techniques that everyone can use to negotiate successful outcomes for everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Scotty. Look, we're all negotiators. We negotiate every day, every aspect of our life, whether it's with, as you mentioned before, partners, family, friends, or work colleagues, or business suppliers, business partners as well. Whatever we want, we need to do it, get it through other people and with other people, and it's an aspect of our life. Now, workplace negotiations is not too different from that or the workplace. We either have to work as an employee, or we have to work with a manager as an employer, or there are, these days particularly, there's contractors, there's other suppliers, alliance partners, people we haven't got direct authority over, but we have to influence. So it's a lot of areas that we work across, very similar to the workplace. A big part of the workplace, though, it's built around relationships. And an organisation is built on relationships and the people. It's a negotiated order. But when we look at workplace negotiations, there's particular issues that you could be negotiating. It could be salaries, work conditions, opportunities, career development. It could be assignments or role assignments you've been given, those particular issues as well. Or it could also be around projects or teams, cross-boundary teams, particularly in this day and age where we're now working to more flat organisational structures, more collaborative structures. So you've got to negotiate tasks, responsibilities, how you align interests up to a common goal and get people to work towards that common goal, which the common goal I'd call is the invisible leader as well, once you've negotiated that aspect as well. So they're all the issues that we look at. Most people think about, one particular issue. It could be around price, salaries and others, but there's a lot more issues to deal with. And people look at a single issue. You should be looking at a range of issues of how you can package up a deal and work with others. Now, unfortunately, while we negotiate every day, often people don't do it very well. They don't do it wisely, strategically, or confidently. A lot of that's to do with around their negotiation competencies as well, or their knowledge around how to negotiate effectively. By default, a lot of people will go to the traditional form of negotiation, which is referred to as distributive or positional negotiation.
What do you call the first one again? What was that?
Distributive bargaining or distributive negotiation or positional negotiation. So a lot of that comes back to the point that it's generally adversarial. It's a competitive approach. For me to gain something, I can only see it in a singular fashion in that approach. For me to gain, you have to lose. And so it's a fixed pie mentality. So we're fixed over one particular item that we are looking to negotiate over. So for me to get more of that, you have to lose some of that as well. So it's a some lose approach. It could be a lose-lose approach and a few others as well. But that's the traditional form of negotiation. It's instinctive, and it really comes back to our instincts as well. It comes back to the old fight, flight, or freeze approach with our thinking. But everyone does that. That's what they default to naturally. But if they had the negotiation skills to move beyond that, that's where it goes to the problem-solving aspect of negotiation, if that makes sense. So I've got a little area. What we need to consider at the very outset is to look at our negotiation styles and really reflect upon our negotiation styles and look at what works and what doesn't. So I'll just share the screen for a minute, just in relation to negotiation styles, and that can be a little bit of a segue into some of the strategies we can use for negotiation. So here we have a diagram of the different negotiation styles in the context that we work on. So in relation to that, we have, on the left-hand side of this table is a focus on relationships. What you can't see, and I'll bring that up, is underneath is also the focus on the substantive outcomes. They're the problems to be resolved, or what you want to get out of negotiation. So there's 5 different styles of negotiation, and 4 of them relate to that distributive bargaining and positional negotiation. One is a more advanced approach to negotiation. So if we have a look at it, competition is an area where people are more adversarial. For them, they're more aggressive, assertive. They want to win. They want to get more out of it, of the negotiation, the other party. Sometimes it's that competitive approach. I need to do better than the other party. So that really is a some-lose approach. Now, for me to gain, I'll win, you're going to lose. That's the particular approach as well. The other one is the aspect of avoidance. Now, avoidance comes to the point where you think, well, the relationship, when you look on the left-hand side, the relationship's most important. You know, the substantive outcome is not as important as the relationship, or it's too difficult between both of us. I'll avoid it. I haven't got those negotiation skills, so they walk away. That ends up with a lose-lose for both parties if they can't resolve it. The accommodation is the other area as well. That, for me, I want to preserve the relationship, so I need to give up something to preserve that, or something of value to me. So that will be, for me, a lose and a win for the other party as well. So each of them are suboptimal. They're less than successful outcomes. They relate to a dominating style of negotiation. It's around domination. The other issue is around collaboration. Now, when you look at that particular area of negotiation styles, you'll see compromise right in the middle. And most people believe that the aim of negotiation is to reach a compromise. I've seen plenty of presentations in this area. It's not. It really is. When you compromise, people think it's equal, but it really, in effect, it's just splitting it down the middle to make it look equitable. But it means that I've got to give up something, you've got to give up something of what you value and it's worth there as well. It doesn't create value. It's a claiming value approach between both parties. So when we look at those styles, competition, avoidance, accommodation, or compromise comes into that domination style of negotiation, and it's limited. It's limited to a fixed pie mentality. You think, well, that's all we've got to work on. You don't look beyond it to create options of value, and you're distributing through there. The real aim of negotiation is to work together in a joint problem-solving approach with the other parties, and that's the collaborative negotiation style as well. And it's usually referred to as mutual gains negotiation, or principled negotiation, or interest-based negotiations as well. So if we look at those particular areas and think, well, if I was going into a particular area of negotiation with a party and I'm taking it to someone, if I was looking at the dominating effect, all I'd be thinking about is my interests. I'm going into that negotiation. I'm not thinking about the other party, and I'm going in. And generally it comes back to an ask. It's not really a negotiation. It's what you're asking to satisfy your particular interests at the same time. Whereas when you look at the more integrative approach to negotiation, the collaborative approach, I'll go into negotiations and not only think about my own interests, but I'll be looking at the other interests and the problems that the other party has as well, and how I can work around satisfying those particular interests and craft my options or what I can offer as well to the other party to look at coming up with a solution that will be a win for them, a win for me, but you're actually expanding the pie, if that makes sense. So when I look back, and I've got the issue, I know it's a little stage prop here as well, but I've got an orange that explains it simply around this idea of integrative bargaining and the positional approach. Now, again, we had two people quarrelling over an orange, and they said, look, I want that more than you. I'm going to get it. I achieve that orange. I have the whole orange to myself. The other party misses out completely. The avoidance issue is that, hold on, it's not worth it. Neither of you are getting the orange. It's put aside. You lose. The accommodation is where I've got to give the orange to someone else. But when we come to the collaborative approach, well, before we get to that, people say, look, we need to compromise. It's equitable. The orange is fixed. There's only one orange, so to be equitable, we'll just cut it in half, and we'll split that. That's an equitable way of doing it. Everyone thinks that's fair and reasonable. But the problem being is we're looking from a self-interest aspect of what we want. We're not sharing information. We're not talking about, what you want the orange for, or what you want to gain out of that particular orange. Now, if we went to collaboration, we'd be looking at and asking questions and finding out what their interests are, their underlying interests that they have. So with that particular orange, someone would say, look, I just want the peel. I want to bake a cake, so I just want the peel. The other party says, I want the juice. So, I like that juice. If you can trade across those particular differences, we end up with more of what we want. So rather than going halfway over the compromise, we end up more of what we want. So that's a simple explanation of those different negotiation styles. It's handy to look at that and say, look, and naturally you look at, I'm generally focused on a more competitive style. I want to win all the time rather than collaboration. So how you adapt your style, your approach to be a more collaborative negotiator at the same time. It's worthwhile to reflect on the other party's styles as well, because you'll come across people that are dominating, hard bargainers. So you need to have a tool set in place, skills and knowledge in place to deal with hard bargainers or people that work on distributive negotiation. So if we were looking at setting a structure to your negotiation approach, there's a number of techniques, but what I'll do is walk through some of them, but to go back, I'll delve back into the positional approach as well. So generally they look at it as a some-lose approach for negotiation. And again, for them to win, you must lose. A lot of it is used around either deception, persuasion, force, coercion, for you to move across to my particular position. That's all I'm interested in. So the idea of going to negotiations, trying to convince you that you need to move across to my argument, my side, completely. So that's the positional negotiation approach. It really is only suited to a single item or a single approach when you're looking at that distributive approach to negotiation at the same time. It's not suited to more complex negotiations or relationship aspects as well. The strength of it is it's universally understood. Most people understand it right across the globe. It's not a cultural issue. It's really coming back to that baseline at the same time. And it's easy to use. You don't need a great deal of preparation for it, and it's just something that's instinctive. It's not strategic. So that's the idea of positional negotiation. Where its weaknesses are, as I said, it doesn't deal with the relationships. It doesn't deal with multi-dimensional or multiple issues or complex issues at the same time that you face in the workplace. It limits it. It doesn't give you the opportunity to come up with options or problem solving. And it's really based into claiming value rather than creating value. So that's the limitations of positional negotiation, but it's something that we do most of the time. It's like the market haggling. It really is used where, you want to address the substantive issues, but the relationship issues are not important to you. So, we'll default to that. We'll use positional negotiation when there's no really tie to relationships are not important. So you just go to get what you want, most that you want. So it has got its spot in negotiation. The collaboration or mutual gains approaches are a little bit different. So there's about 5 core principles of mutual based negotiation or principled interest-based negotiation. The first one is the focus on interest and not positions. So again, it's looking beyond the positions. We all take positions to represent our interests, and we argue for them, and they actually can become entrenched as well, and they're to represent our interests. But if you delve beyond that, you look at really wanting to find out what the underlying interests are to those positions. That's the focus. So you ask a lot of questions. You ask, why is that important to you? How could that work? But if you come back to the why that's important to you and keep on going, you'll find the core underlying interest, and that way you can craft up options or solutions that could address those interests much better than what the position they have presented to you. So the position might be purely on price, but why do they want that particular cost of the price? Ask it. It might be their financial situation, it might be just ego, it might be something else. So you really got to delve into that and then come back with crafting some options around that as well. The other important focus is to focus on the problem and not the people. And by meaning that is really looking at the substantive issues that you want to resolve, the rational decision making around that aspect, and not the people issues that can get in the way. And when we say the people issues, it's the emotional issues that we all take in. It's our bias that we take into areas, the anxiety, the fear of being taken, overpowered by a more powerful adversary, all those particular issues as well. And if we can mine behind that and focus on dealing with those emotional issues separately, and then focusing and shifting away to focusing on the problem we want to resolve. So, it could be me going into the negotiation and I'm really I'm asking for something, someone else will come back and say no straight away. You look at them as they're the problem rather than, the solution. So you really got to look at that particular aspect, get beyond the person, treat them with respect, appreciation, the others, open up the dialogue around communication with the other party as well. We'll then move on to the other aspect is relying upon the use of objective criteria and standards. So rather than the emotional will of people, is looking at benchmarking, whether it's around salaries, whether it's around hours worked, or some other particular aspect. If you're in a negotiation outside of work, it could be around, standards. It could be around rental leases or whatever the standards, what the standards are around what they're paying. You need to have that evidence to bring it back to the objective area around the problem, and take it away from the emotional aspect. So you're not negotiating over will, you're negotiating over those fair standards that you can rely upon. Another area that you really is important is to look at generating a range of options. And there are options without committing, so you can come up with other aspects of how you can solve this issue and how you can introduce this to the other party as well. Now you can look at that, the other party having those options as well that they could give to you. Also, all the way along is think about the other party, really about what their constraints are, what their underlying interests are, what the problem is to them as well. But then think about how you can craft your options as solutions that you can take there. So rather than going into your negotiation with simply an ask, recognise the problem that the other party might be facing and then come up with those particular options that could solve it. So you're taking options of possible solutions that can go to the other party at that time. So generate as many options as you can without committing, and then you can narrow them down. You can trade across differences. Like those alternatives could be something of little value to you, but a lot of value to the other party and vice versa. So you can trade across your differences. And that's the other aspect, is to look for not only what you have an interest, a common interest, but look for the differences that you value and how you can trade across those differences and integrate them to build a bigger pie. Another most important aspect is your BATNA, and this applies to positional bargaining as well as mutual gains. Now, your BATNA, I've mentioned that before, is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And by saying that, it sets your walk-away position and it increases your power. So if what you've had offered to you, or you can't get that particular deal, if you've got a better offer somewhere else, or you've dealt up your BATNA, you can build that up. That extends your bargaining range with the other party. So if you've gone in, it sets your reservation price, which is just a bit over it, or your reservation of the value, what you want to offer. You need to find out what the other party is as well. You're not thinking about yourself at the same time. Also think about their BATNA. What's their alternative? How can you weaken that? So if you can sweeten the deal and the other aspects there, and that'll weaken their BATNA as well. So you'll push the bargaining range in your favour out to that particular area, and that'll work in both ways as well. So that expands the bargaining range of the pie. It also gives you a good inkling of where you can anchor what you want to present to the other party. So if I've come along and looked at the other party and I've estimated their BATNA, I've asked a lot of questions, I've worked out what their alternatives are. So that's the idea of engaging with the other party. That's important. Asking a lot of questions, getting the intelligence from the other party so you can set the bargaining range, know what's on the table, what's not. And then you can then anchor as high as you can then towards where their resistance point is, their BATNA. So you can anchor high, and if you need to trade back, well, you can trade back from there. But the problem is if you make the first offer or the anchor, you don't want to go in there not knowing what the bargaining range is properly. It could be above your BATNA, but you don't want to anchor it too low. And then the other party puts up the hand, accepts it straight away. And you think, oh, great, I've got what I've wanted. But you then end up with what's referred to as the winner's curse. You realise afterwards you could have done much better out of that as well. So it's another aspect you've got to consider to go back.
So, Peter, what was the best alternative to what?
It's the best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Negotiated.
So if the agreement that you're working on, the offer that's come back to you and it's fixed and the other issues, well, you come back to developing a BATNA before you go into negotiation. I'll go with that shortly around structuring your preparation for negotiation as well. So your BATNA is one area. That zone of agreement we talk around, you'll hear the acronym sometimes called the ZOPA, which is the zone of potential agreement. That's the idea of working out that zone and how you can build it up. And that's a great deal of intelligence where you can craft your negotiation within that zone, where you can push it. The option is that's why I say about generating a number of options of where you can trade across differences. If you can add other areas of value into that zone, you're expanding the pie, you're expanding the value, creating value. And that's why it's important to look at the other party as an ally, a collaborator that you want to engage and work with, rather than an adversary to that point, because you can then come back with those options and build value in negotiation. So that'll take us back, and I don't want to drift, but I think we'll take us back to the option of probably very, very important negotiation. 60 to 80% of all negotiation success is attributed to the preparation process. So when they talk about negotiation, they keep on saying prepare, prepare, prepare. So in your preparation process, before you even go into negotiation, is that you look at those key areas. What are my interests? You've got to be clear on what you value. And forget about the positions and think, well, what is it I really want to serve? What are the interests I want to serve that's going to be satisfactory to me or in my best interest? What are the values? So you've got to look at what you value the most and then how you can craft your options around it. So look at the interest. Be clear on what you want out of negotiation, first place. Then consider their interests as well, because that'll help you look at how you can craft it around to align your interests, dovetail them in with the other party to create value. So the first step is to consider your own interests, map them out in preparation, map out their interests as best as you know them. The other area then is to then think about the options I can provide before you get into it. So come up with a range of options that might fit in with those particular issues and how you can come up with it. So you're prepared before you even go into the negotiation. You've come up with a range of solutions. So therefore, if you're going into a salary negotiation or some other aspect, it's not a simple ask. You're taking solutions in with you as well. And that's where it's important at the same time. So again, you look at those particular range of options. And when I talk about interest, also I've mentioned before, is you've really got to think about that problem. What is the problem that the other party has? Because generally it's not them, they're not the problem. They've got constraints on their side of it as well. You go and ask for a salary issue and what you don't realise, you're only thinking about your aspect before you go in. You've got to think about their problems. What are their constraints? How you can craft something up that will provide the solution to those particular constraints at the same time and work with them. That way you're actually taking a solution to them. The other aspect as well, as I mentioned, is the BATNA. Prepare your BATNA, build up your BATNA, do some research, look at other offers. There might be offers from other employers, or there might be some other aspect. It could be when you're working with another party and they've asked you to undertake more roles, responsibilities, or a particular project that takes you away from your work at the same time, makes more pressure, more workload for you. So then you come back and think, well, I'll go out to the other parties I'm supposed to work with and say, look, I can do this for you. However, I need this support, I need these resources in those particular areas. So you look at building up your BATNA instead of just accepting an ask. So if the other party asks you to do something or they ask you for something, well, you can say, yes, I'll do that. And the end is, this is what I need to do. And then that's where you're building up that value at the same time. So again, think about your BATNAs and how you can improve it. The more work you do in your BATNA gives you power in negotiation because, it's your fallback position. You don't feel as dependent, and that's particularly so. It's really important to look at your BATNA when you go through.
So to relate that back to the, negotiating, around workplaces, a lot of people negotiate salaries, but your BATNA includes what we spoke about, which is your conditions and career opportunities, right? So it's not just salaries, it's those other things. And I guess this is where, whether you're an employer or an employee, that's where the BATNA comes right into it,
Exactly.
The best alternative to a negotiated agreement. But that's where I guess you start to come up with those, as you said, you come up with all your options and your solutions. I mean, everyone wants to have, there's a reason why you're in a conversation, call it a negotiation. It's because someone wants more, or someone feels they need more or deserves more. So yeah, I like the way you worded that, hey?
Well, we all want more, and that's the idea of mutual gains. It's where you can gain more out of negotiation. But unfortunately, by default, when we want more, we feel that's a fixed pie. We've got a single issue, so they have to lose something, they have to give up. So getting back to that issue around just on salary, that's a single issue. But if you mind, that's the position you're taking. If you mind underneath it, there's a lot more value there, a lot more options you can work on, and you need to find that out as well. Again, you could trade off around hours worked, the conditions of work, who you can work with, career opportunities. You can trade it off. You mightn't get the salary you want straight away, but in trading it off, you get a career opportunity to take it on. I'll do that work. However, it's contingent on perhaps at this time I have that offer of taking up that particular position, where we go through. And that's the other issue, a contingency bet. So we call them contingency bets or agreements, is where you come back and say, a person will say, look, I want you to do this, or I'll promise something. You're not sure if they'll deliver the trust. So what you do is build in a contingency. If I do that, this is what should be done in return at a particular time.
Yeah,
so
cool.
We talk about the BATNAs. Then again, you've got to be very clear. Do your research around your objective criteria, the standards. So you can introduce that as an evidence base. Look, this is what others are paying at this particular role, or this is the particular work I'm doing. This is evidence of all that invisible work I've been asked to do. When we talk about invisible work, it's not in your position description, it's not the other work you're doing, but a lot of people take on a lot more. This happens a lot with women in negotiation, because they've asked to be doing a lot more work and they're taking it on, and the value is not visible. What you have to do is make your value visible to the other side as well.
Yeah.
So if you can show that even in your objective criteria, you can knock back those arguments against why you shouldn't have better conditions or better salary in those particular aspects as well.
So the four styles, that was accommodation, collaborative, avoidance, and competition, right?
That's correct. And the other one we talk about is compromise is built in the middle of it. I've bundled all of those in: compromise, accommodation, avoidance, and competition in the positional bargaining phase. There's suboptimal outcomes that you'll achieve. What you really want to strive for is that collaborative, interest-based, integrative negotiation, referred to as principled negotiation as well.
So with salaries and conditions and your career opportunities and relationships, I guess there's your style and there's also recognizing their style. So that's going to help out with negotiation.
Exactly. And then you can craft an approach. If they're hard bargainers, you can go back to those other particular areas around your toolbox, your skills and aspects, the objective criteria you can introduce as well. Come back to your objective. So you're actually reframing it and bringing them into your style of negotiation. The big thing is
adapting to theirs if you have to, right?
Exactly. And you can face it, as I mentioned before, as those areas of preparation around setting your zone, getting your BATNA, and that's your walk away. So again, it's a good influential issue. If someone says, no, you're not having that, well, look, I have this alternative, I have this offer, or whatever, you can counter it. But there was another negotiation expert, Deborah Cole, that works around a lot of gender in negotiation, workplace negotiations, and she referred to as smoothing your BATNA as well. Don't come back with it as a demand or being aggressive with your BATNA at the same time. It's really where you can introduce and say, look, I've had this offer elsewhere, a much higher offer than what I'm getting here. However, I much prefer to work here. What could we do to make that happen so it doesn't cost me to work here? You're engaging it, you're shifting it around to a problem-solving approach at the same time. Yeah. Instead of saying, look, take it or leave it, because the other party might be a hard bargainer or whatever and stuck to positions that works against their interests. Like, if I lost someone, I'd have to recruit, I'd have to do everything else to do it. But again, they'll take a position and say, look, no, I'm not going to give in to this, see you later. And as a result, both parties lose. It's an issue that comes up, it's an avoidance issue at that point. So just be careful about using your BATNA as well and smoothing that out and to build it up at the same time and how you introduce dialogue. The big thing, most important aspect as well of negotiation is active listening. So again, it's listening to the other party, not going in and just hitting them with something and expecting them to take that on board. Ask them a lot of questions. Take it back. You can reframe it in a positive approach as well. But it's really finding out by active listening, you're picking up a lot of knowledge, and knowledge is power in negotiation. That helps you craft solutions that go back at the same time. And again, other parties also feel that they've been heard and they've been appreciated. So it pulls down that defensiveness and they're more likely to work with you and engage with you. The big thing is with negotiation is that circular response. You want to keep that engagement going and involve people at the same time. And hostage negotiators, the mantra that's used all the time is when they engage with people, they keep on saying, talk to me. Because the idea they want to engage that subject, they want to find out a lot more and how they can craft something and then shift it from that positional bargaining or especially when emotions are running very high, shift it from that positional bargaining to that interest-based approach of generating options and solutions.
Two good lines, right? Talk to me, and why is that important to you? I like it, around salaries. So any questions there, Anthony, Rob? Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got one. So I just got a tiny bit lost about the BATNA and the anchoring. Can you just explain, especially the BATNA for the other person? What was that, and what is anchoring?
Well, the anchoring is where you come up with your first offer. If you're going in, you make an offer there and it anchors you. Because if, say it was traditional positional bargaining, you've made an offer for a house and all of a sudden you're locked into that. If they come back to you and say, no, that's not good enough, where can you go? You can only go south on that particular anchor at that time to where your walkaway is. So you've limited that bargaining range, if that makes sense. So the idea, it comes back to intelligence as well, and knowing the information for the other party, where you know where their BATNA might be, where you anchor high, close to where they're still in front, so they're not going to lose. And this is coming back to distributive bargaining, but the same principles. So if you're going up the particular area there, you're pushing up the bargaining range up here as well. And then you can have sequences of offers going back to what might be acceptable to you as well. But you're up high. But if you anchor too low, that's where we talk about that winner's curse. Someone says, oh yeah, well, that makes sense to me. I'll agree to that. And you know you've lost a lot of value there at the same time. So it's really important to work out, not only think about yourself, but think about the other party as well. And it's the intelligence coming back. Think about what their constraints are at the same time. Ask them, why is this a problem for you? How could this work? And another aspect we can come back to, if you're asked, an unreasonable demand or whatever, is come up with what's referred to as a positive no. At a positive no, you can come up with appreciating what the other party is. You say, look, I understand you're in this particular situation. I understand that this is very important to you, what you're asking for. However, as a result of X, Y, Z, this is why it can't work. How can we make this work? So that's really a positive no. It really is the getting to yes. You start with a yes with the other party. I appreciate, I understand the other aspects there from their point of view. That takes down the defensiveness and the other aspects. However, this is why it won't work for us because of X, Y, Z. How can we work together, or what other options can we look at to resolve this particular issue?
Yeah, good. Does that answer the anchor? Yep. Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got one, Peter. So if you're wanting to negotiate, if you've got a situation where there's a negotiation that's going to happen regardless, and it's with, let's say, competition, and you know that the negotiation is going to be rigorous, how do you go about, without inflaming the other party, to get a deal done? And if you're coming to the table with a which you know is fair for both parties, but and understanding the whole principle of anchoring to then be able to negotiate to that fair point, how do you go about getting to that fair point without anchoring, which would inflame the other party?
Well, the anchoring comes back to, as I mentioned before, it's looking at their BATNA as well. It's very unlikely if you're going to inflame them. Naturally, people will come back and there'll be bluster and other aspects because they want to achieve more. And you'll deal with that as you go along. The hard bargaining style, as mentioned before. But honestly, I don't think you would inflame someone if they've got their BATNA and what you've anchored is better than their BATNA. They're hardly going to be, really inflamed with the situation. So it comes back to that structure, preparation beforehand. Look at, what the zone of agreement can be within. Then come back to all those fair standards, the objective criteria that you can go back to. Look at the options, how you can solve that issue with them at the same time. But keep that engagement with the other party. As I said, look at their interests and look at their reasons for saying no. And if you can find out what the reasons are for saying no, then craft your solutions, your options, of where you can satisfy those particular issues. So, you've solved the problem for them as well. You're not just solving your problem, you're solving their problem. And this happens, when we talk about workplaces. You've got managers and you think, oh, look, they're the problem. Well, it's called attribution theory. Everything that works well I've done that, and I believe I'm the good person. I do this and that. The other party, I've asked them for something. They're the adversary. They're doing all the wrong things. And the other aspect, if you walk in their shoes, they'd be looking at exactly the opposite direction at the same time. So you really got to think about the others. Take a walk in the other party's shoes as well. Think of it from their perspective, and then see how you can craft those particular solutions. Always show a lot of appreciation and understanding and respect, no matter how hard a bargainer. Don't get sucked into bad behaviour. And this is the problem we talk about positional bargaining. Where it doesn't work is that the emotions take over, you're defensive, you'll act in a certain way. Guess what? They react back as well, because it's that old emotional response, and you're tied up in that hard bargaining area. What you want to do is use those we've only talked about the fundamentals today, but take those particular negotiation skills and how you can make that shift from being in an emotional state and the competitive state and shifting up to the more problem-solving area. So if you can shift around options and start talking about problem-solving, the other aspects, you're taking them away from the people issues and you're taking them to the problem. It's getting back to, I think, the nub of what you were just saying is that it appears that you think they'd be more competitive and hard bargainers. So you've got to implement those particular tools that go back to objective criteria. Show your value as well, why it's good for them. You've really got to craft it in the way where you can say, well, this is why it's going to be good for you. This is why we're offering that at the same time. Then introduce your BATNA. Honestly, a lot of people will go into negotiation without a BATNA. They've got no plans, they've got no other aspects, and they're so hooked into reaching a deal or committed to doing the deal, they'll accept a deal that's worse off for them. It's against their interests at the same time. So really, if you keep those fundamentals around looking at their styles, taking the time to understand, seek to understand to be understood. That's the big thing. Really find out a lot about the other party. Then you can craft your solutions there. But look at those particular steps in relation to negotiation. Afterwards, feel free to contact me and I can go over, the outline of those particular steps, the preparation phases, the style around mutual gains bargaining, all of those particular approaches. You need that skill set. We talk about how we think. Our mind has got, there's three different layers. The very bottom is around those emotional abasement, and it's really around your amygdala. Everyone falls into it. As soon as there's something up there that triggers it, it triggers back your emotions. How long you stay down there and twirling around and being defensive, it depends on how you can get out of that to your more rational problem-solving brain, and that in the middle brain is where you have that toolbox that you can bring in, the negotiation skills that could shift you from that emotional responses or reactions to those more rational decision-making and the responses that are more productive.
How'd that go, Rob?
Yeah, good. And just one real quick one. What's your stance on putting the first proposition forward as opposed to basically throwing it to them and saying, give us your proposal?
Again, it depends on the intelligence you've got and how you're prepared, because, you have your first, it would be good to make the first offer in the anchor, but close to their BATNA, where you look at it, it's different to your aspiration price. You might want something right up here, and we went back before where everyone wants an aspiration price high to get as much as they can, but look at their BATNA. And then move up towards there as far as you can with your anchor, your first anchor, your first offer. The other issue though, if you haven't got a BATNA organised, if you haven't been prepared, and this happens a lot, you really got to then have a little bit of a nibble and try to find out, around those first offers. Instead of just jumping and let them come back to something as well, and look at how reasonable that is. You can always go up from there. So if you anchor down low yourself at the first beginning, you can't go up from there, really, can you? You can't backtrack on those particular areas. The only way is going south a little bit as well. So if you look at it, have a look at probably letting the other party come back to an offer as well, and it gives you time to think about other solutions. So, in preparation, in hostage negotiations and other aspects like that, generally you would get a call and have to respond. You haven't had that time to prepare. We'll have all the intelligence, all the other stuff to go beforehand. You're going out to it. But what you are armed with is the skill set, the negotiation skill set, the structure, the processes that you follow when you go into it. Part of that, though, is you will prepare when you're engaging. On the way to a particular negotiation assignment, you're preparing all the way, thinking about the other party, the what ifs, the other aspects there, and building that up. then when you're involved in it, you're using that intelligence gathering at the same time. That's why I say talk to me. Talk to people, get information back from them, and find out a little bit more of the problem from their side, the opportunities you've got and the solutions, and that's where you can craft it. And you're preparing as you go along as well. Also think about other people that are involved, the other stakeholders that have influence there at the same time. We're running out of a bit of time with the power issues and the other, but I was going to go into power, but generally what you look at is power over and power with. Power over aspects are authority and other particular items as well. Power of negotiation, it could be resource power, it could be other issues. Power with is where you can work with other people. Collaboration, that's power. Knowledge, power with that, knowledge is power. We talk about objective criteria, but the power of alliances as well. If you've got advocates within the organisation that depend upon you, you can introduce them. If the manager or someone else or the staff member doesn't want to negotiate particularly with you, get someone of influence that they depend upon at the same time, but depend upon you, and they can help you as well, open the door and advocate on your behalf. So there are other particular items. There's so much, I could go on forever about the nuances and the others, but trying to narrow it down just to the fundamentals that can get you thinking about what do I need to know, or what do I need to develop to get to yes for both parties and create value.
Well, it's hard to give 20 years worth of experience or 30 years worth of experience in 30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
It's really hard. But as far as, we'll wrap up though, Peter, because I know everyone's time precious, so we'll wrap up. But I'll leave you one funny story about how someone didn't understand this who was an employee of mine. And this was like 2005 or maybe 6, so call it 15 years ago. And I'll round some numbers off so it's easy to understand. So I had this guy who was a website designer. He come in and was working for me, and he was really, really good. So I'm giving him a pay rise, at the end of the first 3 months. He'd passed his trial. I thought this guy's going to be brilliant. $50,000 a year. I'm going to give him a $10,000 a year pay rise and tell him he's done a good job and, start him on that career path, right? So we sit down, he starts talking to me. He says, well, I've been offered $100,000 a year for 20 hours a week. And I went, congratulations, well done. I mean, I had nowhere to go. So when it came to his turn to negotiate, he just did an absolute shocker. Anyway, a couple of years later, one of the other guys was leaving, and, he actually went on into politics and all sorts of things. So he's leaving of his own reasons. And he said to me, do you remember the guy? And I said, yeah. He said, why didn't you negotiate or cross offer? And I said, cross offer with what? The guy just said he got paid twice as much to do half as much. I mean, I can't compete against that. I just said, well done. And because he was amazed that I didn't try to negotiate or keep him. I've gone, man, he went so far up and above that I just had to say, well done, congratulations, shook his hand and said, grab your bags, go take advantage of that job offer you just got. Go take it.
So that's a person's naivety. You come back and they've anchored too high. And
just crazy stuff.
Outside your zone of agreement, your BAT and the other issues, that's one point. But if you could go back to them and really a reality check back to them, when you go back, what are the other conditions? What else can they do with you that they can't do with that other party? And you wanted more money than everyone else was on to do half the work. It just wasn't going to happen. We were so unaligned. Who knows where we got that idea from? But that's part of negotiating salaries and your workplaces and your conditions. And people just need to think, what do you call it, objectively and things like that. Come up with options and solutions. So that's wrapping up with under your positions. Think about the underlying interest all the time.
So we're wrapping up with today. The workplace negotiations, there's a few things for people to think about there and a few ways of doing it. But I'm really keen on doing more, Peter, around other negotiations that we do, like, in small business, you're negotiating contracts and agreements, or you spoke about real estate, or, even negotiating good prices when you're out buying things like cars and stuff. So the art of negotiation, I'm certainly keen on looking at the next chapter as we go forward. So we'll investigate doing stage 2 or 3. And
that'd be good. Yeah, look, Scotty, it comes back to the nuances, the techniques. You can break them down in items. You can expand upon that as well. And
so how do people find out a little bit more? You've got your courses somewhere, or they just follow you on LinkedIn?
They can follow me on LinkedIn. My website is www.spans.com.au. My website, it needs to be revamped as well, but there's information and background there. There's certain blogs there as well about a lot of these issues around collaboration aspects as well. But, I actually deliver coaching, presentations and programs on negotiation at the same time. A big focus on collaboration there as well. So they can reach me via LinkedIn or via the website, or drop me an email. And the email is pmpspence@bigpond.com.
Sweet. I'll share some of those links, obviously on the show notes and your profile. On System 1357, and there's the replay of this will go up there, as well as watch some other replays, around business development, sales. There's a whole heap of things we've got on there as far as replays go. So on that note, we better wrap up. It's been an awesome session. Thanks heaps everyone for your time, and we'll see you all at the next one.
Thanks everyone. Appreciate it. All the best.
Thank you, Peter.